Good morning, you're very welcome back. Now, our next guest is one of the most prominent figures in modern Irish politics, serving 2 terms as Taoiseach and making history as Ireland's first openly gay leader.
His book, Speaking My Mind, it is out in paperback on Friday. Good morning, Leo Varadkar. How are you doing?
Pretty good. Little nervous. This is my first TV interview this year.
This year?
Yeah.
2026. You've been on the TV plenty. But how are you finding post-Taoiseach, post-leader of Fine Gael life?
Yeah, it's been good. It's nice to have. I love the job I was doing. It was a great privilege to serve for so long. To serve my country, serve my community. I'll always be grateful for that opportunity. But it's so nice to have control over my own time again. Just free time to do my own thing and personal intellectual freedom that I kind of forgot. And even just doing basic normal things that I didn't do for a long time. Like I cook my own dinner 3 or 4 times a week now because I'm home in time to do so. And
you're becoming a food influencer.
I don't think that's quite the case.
I don't know. People are always like, what's he eating today?
Hopefully you're putting your lids on your Tupperware now, because that caused a bit of a storm.
I still get trouble for that, but
you mentioned personal.
There were no air fryers back when I was cooking my own food, and they're really handy.
There we go. A little insight.
You look healthy. You look like I don't know if you've been away. You look like, I see your socks. You've got batteries on it, and it says fully charged on it. Which I'd say life as Taoiseach meant you were always running on empty. So it must be nice to get away from that and actually get your sleep.
You're actually, and look, you know this from your sporting background, you're kind of running on adrenaline all the time. And then you have these sudden crashes when you get a holiday or get a break, which is rare enough. And then also there is a low level anxiety. You're always a little bit worried about a story that's going to break, what's going to be on the news this morning. So, when I turn on the news now in the morning, I listen to the news, whereas it used to be, oh my God,
petrified.
Why didn't nobody tell me about this? Get on to my chief of staff straight away, I want a briefing by 10 o'clock. Whereas now when I listen to the news, I listen to the news.
And
it's just very different.
When you're out and about on the streets now, because we know there was a fractious time in your life there was protests outside your house, in your private space, which you freely let happen, which seemed it was very targeted rather than being outside a government building. It was out someone's house. How are you finding it now, just being a normal human, going about, a citizen living their life? Yeah,
look, even though you don't take these things personally, on a certain level you do. And like one thing I have kind of found is, most people just leave you alone, let you do your thing. When people come up to me now, it does tend to be much more positive than it would have been in the past.
Okay.
And that's not necessarily because I believe people think I'm great or anything like that. I don't. I'm sure there are plenty of people who think I was rubbish. But when you're actually in office, people will come up to you and they'll tell you about their concerns. They'll tell you about their problems. They'll tell you why they're angry about X, Y, or Z. When you're out of office, I think people kind of accept the fact that actually, you're not in office anymore, and they're more likely to thank you for things that you did than give out to you for things that you didn't do in the past. Still get a little bit of abuse. That does happen. Get shouted out the street, but it's probably every second week or every month rather than what would have been the case previously.
When you step down, like I've heard a previous interview talking about the likes of Justin Trudeau, you talked about Tony Blair, that maybe they overextended their stay as leader of the country, and you made quite an abrupt stepping down as Taoiseach of the country. Who knew? Who did you discuss this with? Because it's a very personal matter.
Yeah, well, very few. My partner Matt, my chief of staff Brian, my long-serving PA who still works for me, Lisa Tavey. So there really only were 3 or 4 people who knew.
Okay.
You have to keep these things tight.
Yeah.
People in politics and life talk. You tell one person too many, and it gets out. Once you indicate that you're going to step down, your authority is gone.
Yeah.
It's gone that second, and people are thinking about who's the next person in charge. So that's why I had to keep it very tight. So it was kind of a mic drop moment. I think for about a year, people were still waiting for some sort of scandal to break or something. But hopefully at this stage now, they'll know there isn't one coming. But it wasn't an easy decision, and I had prepared myself psychologically for regrets. That I'd turn on the TV, I'd see Micheál or Simon announcing something that I'd worked on for 2 years, but like that didn't happen. So Yeah, look, it was the right time for me, and also I think it was the right time for my party, for Fine Gael, and for the country, because the truth is people get sick of people in politics very quickly now. And I was very lucky. I had 13 years in government, 7 leading my party, both as Taoiseach and Taoiseach. Actually, the longest period, continuous period in government for my party, leading it, and that was actually a lot. Like look at England now. You know, Keir Starmer, barely 2 years, and he's already on the chopping block.
Yeah.
There isn't, in the democratic world, there isn't a prime minister who isn't in trouble after a year or two. So you know, I feel quite lucky that I actually got a chance to do a lot of good things.
And it does feel, you know, that the timelines are changing, that maybe it isn't a lifetime commitment as once it was seen for an awful lot of people. And you said there, you know, you're proud of the things that you did. Of course, you were a Taoiseach during COVID at the start, and that everyone remembers that first speech that you gave when we went into that first lockdown. There was repealed the 8th, there was the Marriage Equality Act. There's an awful lot of things there. There's also other things that we talk about now. Obviously, social media is the thing that's talked about all the time, the regulation of which kind of is firmly on Ireland's shoulders. Like, are there certain things inside that you look at now going, I wish that I had been able to get that sorted?
Oh, look, there are loads, and you know, sometimes it's limited bandwidth. There's only so much time to do things, only so much money, and only so many people around to actually do the things you want to do. Say something like house building, we were always limited by the number of people available in the construction industry to build everything we wanted to get built. But one thing you mentioned there on social media, like I definitely feel we should have listened to the people who warned us about the impact on the mental health of children sooner. Like there were people like Mary Aiken, for example, who were blowing this whistle, and we did listen to her. We should have listened to her sooner, in my view. And then also one thing I think we got wrong. You remember we were trying to bring in a law around hate speech to make it illegal for people to say certain things online that might cause people to commit crimes or whatever. That wasn't the right approach. The right approach is to target the algorithms. Like there's always been crazy people saying crazy things in the pub, in their basement, you know, nasty things, racist things, inciting violence. The real problem is the algorithms. The algorithms amplify this.
Yeah.
They actually promote anger, promote hate. It's all about keeping you online, you know, for dwell time, and that's how these companies make money. And I think there's a whole space there around the regulation of social media and the algorithms that we should have acted on sooner, but we can't do it on our own. And again, like a lot of problems, if we don't solve them on an international level, they don't get solved at all. Because with the help of a VPN, with the help of you know, a fake ID, you can get around any law a government makes, any online law a government makes in Ireland.
And is that important then that the EU, everybody buys in this together? Because like we were just talking earlier on about how people's trust in the media is starting to wane.
Yeah.
And I would say the same in politics as well. It's hard to cut through all the noise sometimes.
Yeah.
Where do you see the future of this with so many sources and people now not knowing who and where to go to trust?
Well, I do think, and look, I'm an optimist by nature. I'd have to be given the jobs I've done in life, but I think there will come a point where people seek out authenticity a bit more. Like there's a lot of people who, you know, weirdly don't trust mainstream news outlets like this one, like RTE, like I don't know, the Irish Times or the Indo, and yet at the same time will believe any rubbish they'll see online from anywhere. You know, so I think that will shift. I think a point will come where people will only believe things that they see on their phones from sources that they believe they can trust. We're not quite there yet, but I do think it's going to require more regulation. You know, if you publish a book, you can be sued for the contents. If you publish a newspaper, if somebody comes on your show and says something, you can be sued for defamation. The platforms have total impunity, and that's not right. That they should be held accountable for what they allow on their platform. And
you, like, you know, you're the leader of the country, and I know you're talking about this, but what do you do against trillionaires, billionaires, whatever they are at this stage, whose whole mission is like in life is to deregulation, right? So is that it's across the board. We know that that's happening. We know that there are paid actors. We know that Russia essentially paid 2 Ukrainian fellas to firebomb Keir Starmer's house.
And they're doing worse. So like what we know from the UK is they were paying people to put anti-Muslim graffiti on a mosque, and at the same time to put Islamic graffiti on a church, so that you know, they want people to hate each other. This is part of a hybrid war. Europe is helping Ukraine, so Russia is trying to destabilize our societies.
Yeah.
And a lot of the people you'll see involved in some of the very, very violent protests around Europe and in Ireland are being fired on by misinformation coming from Russia. This is a cyber war.
Yeah.
We're not at war with Russia, but we're not at peace either.
And that's something that's important because we're 10 years on from the murder of Joe Cox, right? The Labour politician who was murdered in the street 10 years ago. And I was listening to her sister 2 days ago talk about how she thinks it's actually gotten worse. That she thought that was going to be the threshold. And she feels like it's gotten worse. And we're just after seeing in Belfast, it still kind of blows my mind when you see the tricolour and the Union Jack, you know, together at these big marches, these Tommy Robinson marches. And with what's happened, that horrific attack in Belfast, like it was mad. What do you make of all this? Because it does feel like we're completely fragmented.
Look, I think the vast majority of people are good people. You know, we've seen some really horrific crimes being committed by people of all sorts of backgrounds in recent months and recent weeks, but they are from all sorts of backgrounds. And we have seen some people engage in some really appalling riots and behaviour, including here in Dublin. But it's not the majority of people. Like, I still honestly believe the majority of people are decent people and will respond calmly and will listen to facts. But there is just a different environment there at the moment, and that does definitely worry me.
Are you glad you're out of it?
I am, yeah. So I've no desire to run for election ever again. But like, I'm not 100% gone.
Yeah.
You know, I'm still my columns Sunday Times, so I can write on issues that I'm interested in, and I can still get involved in individual campaigns. You know, so I'm on a board of a group called Global Citizen. It's the charity partner for the World Cup, and we're raising €100 million for the FIFA Education Fund.
Are you going over?
I'm not. No. The purpose of being on the board of a charity is not to go to an expensive football match. That's not the idea.
Maybe I didn't say free tickets, but I mean, it might be
we'd have to auction them.
I think we might delve a little bit more into that. And you mentioned your personal intellectual freedom, which certainly since you've left office.
World Cup soccer would be waste on me, to be honest.
Okay.
Australia for the rugby next year. Definitely in the mix.
Okay, listen, might see you there, absolutely. Okay, listen, you're going to hang around. We're going to continue this conversation as well after this.